engage in predatory lending, right? And yet laws, even in this state, we had to battle, and we contend, and we allow predatory lenders and these subprime lenders. Now, what is the backdrop of the current economic crisis we're in? Housing, subprime lending, and African Americans lost in one study we've done $200 billion, where 53% of African Americans who qualified for regular loans were steered towards subprime lending, which is why the NAACP is suing 16 subprime lenders now. But we could have avoided all of that if we had heard the basic premise of these civil rights laws, and the basic premise of why we fight for diversity is that any economic system that needs everybody to prosper, for all to prosper, you cannot continuously discriminate and segregate and hold money back from people and not develop all of your markets if you intend to be prosperous. That's what this is really about. And DOT is in North Carolina, and I'm just gonna say it plain, is the nut to crack. If you don't crack this one, you can't deal with the other one. And that's where this has to be cracked. And we gotta up front admit that it's been a problem, and it still is a problem. And incremental change ain't gonna be enough. When we look at this full study, there's gonna have to be some aggressive, fundamental change the way we're doing business to make sure that all people, and if we do it, then all of us will be the better for having done it.
This time I'd like to get Curtis, Mr. Williams, and Naveen to talk about some of the accomplishments, some of the things that DOT has done over the past 5 years since the last study, and also Dr. Boston's talked about some of the recommendations. So if you two just sort of chime in and talk to us a little bit about those two issues, things that you see that we're doing that you like, things that are challenges that remain, and then some of the recommendations Dr. Boston talked about. Let's get you to chime in and talk about that.
I'll just talk from the perspective of the United Minority Contractors of North Carolina. I can't really speak to things that have happened between the studies because I'm not knowledgeable of that. But just responding to some of the comments that were made by Dr. Boston and some of the things that were just said by Dr. Barber and Gray and Shelby, I think there's a full circle that has to be drawn with all of this. And well, we really appreciate the work that's been done to make sure that opportunities are there and that are continuing to be done. The thing that the United Minority Contractors is really trying to focus on is the piece of involving capacity to make sure that there's not a void when those opportunities do come up, that we're really able to make sure that we can move into those opportunities. But the travesty of all of it would be in something you mentioned about the cap, is that if we are successful in doing our jobs and making sure that contractors are available and ready and willing, I think you said ready, willing, and able to do the work, that they run into a glass ceiling that's going to stop them because they're successful. That's working really one force against the other, which really we hope that piece is really taken care of, because everyone wants a piece of the American pie and not just a small crumb of it, and that includes minority firms as well. So we just don't want to have that as a barrier. But really capacity and making sure that we're engaged as well as aware of the pitfalls that are going to be ahead of us before we run into them on the job site. I think it's important to make sure that the knowledge is there, that there are going to be things that will cause us to have to be involved in the legislative process from a grassroots perspective. It's truly important. We've talked a lot about that. So as far as the study, haven't had a real chance to get into it, but just from the comments that I've heard, the capacity piece I think is a part of the total equation that we see is important, and making sure that there are things in place from the DOT's perspective to continue to help us keep that front and center so that those opportunities are a reality.
Can I make one comment to what he just said? You just said something that we need to hear in this room. because of the way Dr. Boston set this conversation up. It is not, as you said, merely on minorities to develop the capacity, because our capacity was stolen by government. So government has an obligation to rebuild capacity. Because he just said to us from Georgia and from the state legislature where capacity was historically robbed. And that's a powerful piece you have. And we have to say that because some people will say, well, you all get ready and get yourselves together and then hit the opportunity. The government that stole it has an opportunity to rectify in partnership, but certainly not a responsibility, not an opportunity to help rectify the capacity that has been stolen and denied over the years.
I think you have a unique perspective being a contractor.
Yeah, well, I was going to say, I know you already mentioned about what DOT's done and my experiences with the DOT. I have had a favorable experience, I have to say, with the DOT, that they offer, a lot of programs that he was mentioning with the Business Workforce Development Office, and, there's a lot of stuff, I think that, they actually helped, indirectly and even directly in some way to help, expand my company, and having these classes available, these consultants available, and taking advantage of that. Granted, the opportunity is there, but it is solely based on the person themselves, the contractor, to actually implement the things that they give to you. And I've been able, luckily to do that. When I know many a times that I'll sit and I'll look back at some classes I took or situations and say, how do I handle this? What is the best way? And I go back and look at it. Even something they suggest, this is how things need to be done. So I know they do help increase, try to help move, minority firms forward, and they're very, very beneficial. And basically, the way I feel is the opportunities there. All I have to do is ask for it. I know Iris is even here, and she helped me out, as a consultant, better understand, our workforce and ways, we implemented new, HR things and stuff like that just to help the business. And so I think that I've had a positive experience with the DOT and moving, helping minority firms. I feel like that they are doing a lot to try to get more, participation and to get more people involved. And it's just basically a lot of it relies on the person to actually go to the class, and then after you go to the class, do what they say, to do. And so that was my perspective.
I'd like to make a comment, because I don't think that comments should be looked upon as personal attacks. And I don't want to get into a situation where, we're having conversations around here's what's good, here's what's not so good, and all of that. What we're trying to do is figure out how do you build the economic base of this state, particularly through the work that one particular department does, the Department of Transportation. We would not be here having this conversation if it were not for the courts and if it were not for law. And DOT right now still has, whatever, and I think the first day it came to the table and had a disparity study, and I was working with the legislature and some of the folks at DOT around the first lawsuit. It really had absolutely nothing to do with people of color or minority contractors or anything. People just found it really, they used it as the way to get at filing a lawsuit. And here we are now, in a position where there was another lawsuit, and the decision is now being appealed.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the questions that I don't necessarily want answered right now, one of the questions for me is, given the basis of the appeal, to what extent does the disparity study respond to whatever has been pointed out by those who filed the appeal as weaknesses in the department and its rationale for having a program one? And I think that is an area that needs to have tremendous focus from DOT. I think secondly, we need to invite everybody in here to be a part of our efforts to lift that net worth cap, because it was arbitrary, as it was simply put there because the people in the Congress, some in the Congress, never wanted it to be said that they were helping to create a black millionaire. Mm-hmm. But nobody goes back and says that a lot of these major corporations today grew up off of federal contracts or public sector